Hello? Is there anybody out there? I finally did it. I started this list maybe about a month ago, and I finally got to it. It's my top 100 albums. Just like I did with my top 100 movies and games, I had to make a top 100 list because I thought it would be fun. And it was, but it was also a little agonizing because it's hard to know where to place some of these. So I'm going to say somewhere after the top 25 or 30, it gets much looser. My list kind of comprises, the albums I enjoy listening to, mixed with the albums that I respect the most, that I also listen to a lot. So I'll give you an example. Like the Dave Brubeck band and Miles Davis. I definitely respect those albums, and I've listened to them a little bit, but it's not the stuff that I go back to frequently. So, these are the albums that I like the most. It just so happens most of them are rock. Who would have thought? It's, I'm a little limited. I admit that. My genres are the ones that I kind of grew up with, that I still the music I play. And as I've said in previous videos, what I end up doing is I can listen to all kinds of music and be like, oh, that's cool, that's catchy, that sounds good, wow, the bass is amazing. But the stuff that I most often go back to is somewhere in the rock genre. Not to say I don't listen to everything else in small doses, but, it's not what I go back to the most. Musically, right now I'm playing video game music because, anything else would just get content claimed. So this list does not include soundtracks, and it doesn't include video game music, because otherwise I would include some video games like Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy, Zelda, Metroid, and for movies, there would be a couple scores on there too. Or like the Top Gun soundtrack from when I was a kid, but Blade Runner, Vangelis, stuff like that. So without further nonsense, let me take this moment to thank you for joining. Keep in mind, my list is definitely going to differ from your list. And this is just for fun, and also maybe you might find a recommendation. And sorry I'm so limited with my genres. If you want, drop your top 10 in the comments. Wow, Tuber Sauce continues, huh? Drop your top 10, let me know what you like, and maybe I'll check one or two things out eventually. So here we go. Oh, keep in mind, I'm going to definitely be missing stuff too. Definitely some stuff I forgot about, and there's stuff that I like that maybe didn't make the list. So I'm going to start at 100 with Sgt. Pepper. Why is Sgt. Pepper at 100? Well, I guess I love the album. I think it's a little overrated because it's so, overplayed, but I do think it's a very important album. It's an amazing album. I love it. I almost forgot it, and then I realized, wait a minute, it would be good as a top, as the 100 spot on this list. It's got Fixing a Hole. It's got A Day in the Life. It's just a great album, but it's the Beatles album that I listen to from time to time. I enjoy it. I love it, but I don't go back too often. Wilco album, Summer Teeth. This is an album that came out before Yankee Hotel Foxtrot. It's great. Good song, Shot in the Arm. Can't Stand It. I think that's the name of it. And plenty more. Great album. I like to go back to it. I put Oasis on here, a bit of a guilty pleasure, but definitely maybe still a great album. It's heavy, for Oasis. It's catchy. The performances are good. I may not like the way Liam calls his brother a potato, but this album is still fucking awesome. And again, sadly, it's a guilty pleasure. I say sadly because Oasis, anyway, here's Wonderwall, all that stuff. But they were a very good band. They only, sadly, I think, lived up to their potential twice, however. So the music playlists are just stopping. It's weird. Okay. Speaking of music that I love, Super Metroid. Okay, so The Cars may be one of the best debut albums ever. It's just single after single after single. Every song on that album is great. And it's just a strong debut. Love it. Same for Foo Fighters. This is the only Foo Fighters album I have on the list because I don't love later Foo Fighters. The color and shape is amazing and maybe should be on this list. But the first one holds nostalgic value, and also because I think Dave needed to make that album, and it was the best, most like raw, emotionally album. And I think I don't think he really matched it. Color and the shape, he got close, and Wasting Light's good too. But Foo Fighters' first album, especially This Is a Call, and I'll Stick Around. Frank Black is the dude. Charles Thompson from the singer and the lead dude of the Pixies had a solo career after the Pixies, and Teenager of the Year, great cover by the way, just great pop song, but a little bit of punk, interesting song structure, catchy, good melodies, great album, recommended. Fleetwood Mac Rumors, this is very low on the list, just because I don't listen to it a ton, but it is an immaculately produced album, and the songs are amazing. Obviously, it's like one of the most famous albums ever, and the story behind it is as interesting as some of the lyrics. I like Tusk. It's not on this list, but Tusk, the follow-up to this, might even be a little bit better. But Rumors definitely had to make the list. It's great. This is when Blur got a little bit Radioheady, got a little weird. They got beyond their Britpop roots and did something just strange, and I think the songs are just really, I don't know how to describe them. They don't conform to any specific style. They can get a little psychedelic, and they can get kind of loud. The soft songs are great too, and it's got Coffee and TV on it. No Distance Left to Run. Great songs. So I put The Who, Tommy, and Quadrophenia here because I can't choose between the two, but I like Tommy a little bit more. When I was younger, Tommy and Quadrophenia might have gone up to like number, 10 or like 20, because I was really into them. Now, they're not my go-to band, but I love and respect those two albums in particular, and more from them too. A quick one while he's away. I also really like Who's Next, The Who by Numbers. So many good fucking albums, but those are the two I think that are their best. They're the rock operas. Tommy, I like just a little bit better, but The Who are definitely great. Jimi Hendrix was one of the first artists that got me into classic rock, and Are You Experienced is just one of his best. I mean, there's just so many classic songs, like just classic rock radio, which is why I don't listen to it a lot, because classic rock radio, just listen to them too many times. But there's a couple deep cuts, and Jimi Hendrix is still, I mean, it's almost like, it's a little low on the list, truthfully, because Jimi Hendrix changed guitar and is still, to this day, one of the guitarists. I just don't understand how he was able to do some of those things. Not because he was fast as well, but also how he was able to, like, do the most incredible improv on the guitar and bear so much of his soul. Now, it's a little cheesy to say that, but no, Jimmy was amazing. This album I got into in the past year, and I think it's just phenomenal. It's a concept album. It's Peter Gabriel, Genesis, and I think there's so many great songs on it, and the concept is weird, but just phenomenal performances and songs. Great album. I put the Weather from Pond. Pond is some of the members of Tame Impala started their own band. I've talked about Pond plenty. They are Australian. For me, this is their best album. Man, It Feels Like Space Again is also very good, but I put The Weather on this list because there's songs on there that, especially 30,000 Megatons, The Weather, Paint Me Silver, Sweep Me Off My Feet is the name of it, I think. Yeah, great album. Just a lot of good songs, great band, and they just put out a new album called 9 that reminds me a lot of The Weather, but is more experimental and has some just great songs on it. The Police's first album has So Lonely, Roxanne, and lots of other interesting ones. I think the rest of the band was writing stuff too. Like, there's some strange songs on this album that, normally, like Be My Girl, stuff like that. Whole of My Life is great. Next to You is great. and Truth Hits Everybody, Can't Stand Losing You. Just a really good debut from a band that I really enjoy. MGMT, Little Dark Age, very recent album, their most recent one, inspired my album Realign a little bit because I love that album so much, Little Dark Age. It is the perfect blend of experimental MGMT and pop MGMT, and just great synth sounds, really good songs, and also very good for its time that it was released. Big Star, their third album, it sounds like a band falling apart. It's crazy, it's really intensely emotional. It kind of sounds a little like shit sometimes, but it's one of those albums I come back to when I need to like kind of hit a low point musically, if that makes sense. I put Dark Side of the Moon up here because it's just overplayed. I love it. I love other Floyd more, but it's great. It's Dark Side of the Moon. What else is there to say? Ocean Rain, great Echo and the Bunnymen album. It's got so many... I need to actually check because it's got Killing Moon on it, which is one of the best songs ever written, in my opinion. And it's got Silver. It's got Crystal Days. Seven Seas and Ocean Rain, those two in particular, fantastic. Echo and the Bunnymen had lots of great albums. This is the only one I have on the list, but they're a great 80s band with lots of good songs. Recommended for sure. I like this album from the Cars a little bit more. There's a little bit more personality in some of the songs. I have it on record. I just enjoy it a lot. It's good. So here's where I cheat a little bit on this album list that I have here, is because I think the Buzzcocks are great, but I don't know any of their individual albums. And there's a couple compilations I put in here. So this is like the singles album. They wrote some of the best pop, some of the catchiest punk songs, and I feel like this is a good representation of their work. I know only a couple songs not on this, but this album in particular, it hits rotation a lot. This is Mark Lanegan from the Screaming Trees. It's his second solo album. It's a dark album, but it's beautiful, and his voice is great. And I got into this album last year, and it blew me away. I found out Cobain listened to this a lot before he died, so be careful. No, it is really dark though, but again, really, really great. I put another Oasis album on here because this to me is like the perfect pop album. You got Champagne Supernova, you got Wonderwall, oh god. But there's so many songs. Roll With It, Hello, Cast No Shadow. There's a million great ideas on this album, and then they never delivered an album as good as this. Or even, in my opinion, close to as good as this. So, they were fantastic, and I grew up listening to that music, and therefore it has to be on my list. Mars Volta, if you don't know, they were kind of like a prog band, heavy prog band from the early 2000s, and Deloused is their first full-length album. I put it kind of low here because I like Francis more, but the second album. This album is incredible. If you ever want to check out a great prog band that's accessible, has catchy songs, fucking bizarre lyrics, and amazing guitars, drums, and bass, I don't know how to explain it. They're just incredible. Some people have called them Pink Floyd on speed and cocaine, which is just Pink Floyd. That's not true. But no, Deloused and the Comatoriums is a good starting point. Definitely listen. MGMT, I really got into Congratulations. This is their experimental stuff that people kind of scoffed at later. But this album is great. I mean, their first album is great too. I don't have it on my list, but this one in particular, it just grows on you. Especially Siberian Breaks. Brian Eno, some good ones. I got the Gizzard on here. I put the Banana album, and this is my only Gizzard on this list, which is a shame, because I'll tell you what, Gizzard became one of my favorite rock bands. Maybe one of my favorite rock bands active right now. They're amazing. I've seen them twice, and I will see them again, I hope in the future. They just released some other good microtonal albums, KG and LW, and they're not as good as this in my opinion, but close. Nonagon could easily be on this list even higher. But for some reason, I chose Flying Microtonal Banana to represent Giz, and I'll tell you what, Nonagon, some days, it's Nonagon as their best. I love Rat's Nest as well. Just all around fucking great band, Fishing for Fishies. I love their music, and they keep making good music. Arctic Monkeys AM. I am a fake Arctic Monkeys fan, so I put AM here. But I do love this album. I don't think there's a bad song on it, and I love the mood of it, the vibe of it. They clearly got some of their mood from Queens of the Stone Age. Josh Homme even shows up. Good album, high recommendation. I know some of their earlier stuff, Bloink, and it's good, but I like this better. And I also really love Tranquility Base Hotel and Casino, their most recent album. It's like a loungy, jazzy, weird experimental album that is not particularly catchy at times, but to me, I think it's just this deep, like, not deep musically, but emotionally, and also it kind of just has a great vibe, and some people don't like it. I love it. I don't know if I like it more than AM, though, so it's not on my list. Tame Impala, I've fallen off the Tame Impala train. They inspired me to start Red Vox a little bit. A lot of it, and Lonerism to me is still my favorite from theirs. Don't get me wrong, I love Inner Speaker. I even think Currents is amazing too. Lonerism's the one that I resonate with the most, and that's the Tame Impala sound I like the best. And I think I don't love the slow rush. I like a lot of it for sure. I think it's mostly really good, but Lonerism just hits every song. Every song does something for me, and I love it. See, I've seen them live 3 times, and each time they got bigger. It went from like Terminal 5 to Radio City to Madison Square Garden, if anyone knows those venues. It just, like, seeing them ascend to this massive thing was bizarre, but also, I'm going to say earned. Even if I'm not a big fan of their more poppy stuff, I can't deny how good Kevin Parker is as a producer and a songwriter. Iggy Pop the Idiot. This one he did during Bowie's Berlin trilogy with Bowie on some songs, and produced at the same time and with many of the same techniques, and it's a really good album. It's Iggy at his most honest, I think, and also just at his most weird, and Bowie has a lot to do with that. So The Idiot is a good Iggy album. Sloan is a Canadian band. I don't know a lot of their stuff, but Twice Removed is great. They're a 90s band. And this to me is just like a great 90s album. Cool songs. Pen Pals is so good. I can't recommend Sloan enough. I only know a couple singles outside of this album, but they're all good. However, this album is genuinely fantastic. I love it. Queen is a little low on my list, but News of the World, this is a weird choice for me because I don't think, this doesn't have... I have Night at the Opera on the list, but this doesn't have the most hits on it. It's just got a lot of great tracks. Actually, that's not true. Hang on a second. I think this actually has quite a bit. I gotta look this up real quick, because I think this album has a lot of hits. We Will Rock You, We Are the Champions, never mind. Sheer Heart Attack, All Dead, All Dead. Spread Your Wings is great. Fight from the Inside is pretty good. Get Down, Make Love makes me laugh. Sleeping on the Sidewalk. It's Late is an underrated Queen song. One of my favorites they've ever done. So yeah, no, News of the World is a fucking cool album, and I think it's one of their more underrated, despite the hits. Flaming Lips, not much to say. I love the Soft Bulletin, but this is probably their most famous album. It's got Do You Realize and Yoshimi, of course. Great vibe, great songs. I can't really say enough good things about it. And I've seen the Lips live, and I didn't love them live, but I can't deny when they did some songs from this album, people lost their shit, myself included. They release a lot of stuff I don't like, especially in the past couple years. But this album, Soft Bulletin, and At War with the Mystics are 3 of my favorite albums. This one's on the list, but those 3 in particular, fucking great albums. The Clash, London Calling. I wasn't sure about London Calling being the representation of The Clash on this list, because I do like combat rock, but I think this is their most consistent album. It's got London Calling on it, obviously. It's got Lost in the Supermarket, Clampdown, Guns of Brixton, Death or Glory. I mean, Train in Vain. It's got Spanish Bombs on it. Yeah, no, this is definitely the right choice. The Clash are one of the best punk bands in my opinion, and this is their best album. and it's deservedly number 69. I got Elton John, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. That Rocket Man movie got me more into Elton, but this album has always been great. The song is great. The production and just like throwing it on and just like getting into all the songs. It's a long album. Every song is like a hit. And yet there's an emotional core to all of it. Elton sounds great. The piano sounds amazing. His band sounds great. Yeah, this album, I got into it pretty big this year, and I listened to it a lot this year, and I'm going to say that I'm glad I did because it helped, and it's great. I know I'm not very descriptive. I need better words than just great. It's astounding. It's, you know what? It's fabulous. Teenage Fan Club. That's another band from the 90s. They are an underrated band. Cobain once called them the best band in the world. Yeah, they're the best band in the world right now. He wasn't wrong entirely. I mean, they had like a Beatle kind of vibe. And they're, Scottish band. And I picked this album, but Bandwagon-esque is great. And same for Grand Prix. This one I like just a little bit better. My favorite songs are on this one, and there's just this big, really vast, like expansive feel to this album for some of the songs. I Don't Want Control of You is just an all-time favorite. So if you haven't heard of the Fannies, Teenage Fan Club, I've played a lot of their stuff over the years. This is a good starting point, or Bandwagon-esque. Depeche Mode, Violator, a little low on the list, but I didn't really know how much of a pop band they were. And then Violator comes along. I listened to it for like the first time in full last year, and I went down a pretty big Depeche Mode rabbit hole. This is still my favorite of theirs, especially because it gets like, it gets really dark. But I think it's fucking phenomenal, and just the songwriting, and I like Dave Gaughan's voice a lot. This to me is their best, but there's also some other great stuff. Songs of Faith and Devotion is good. Playing the Angels really good. Awesome band. Primal Scream, another Scottish band from the early 90s. Screamadelica was like a mix of dub, psychedelic, and rock. And it does a lot of really interesting, weird things. It's a cool fucking album. That's the best way I can describe it. Higher Than the Sun is easily one of my favorite songs. And there's the other one too. There's their famous song, Moving On Up. Come Together is great. Yeah, no, Primal Scream, I've only listened to a couple of their albums, but this one I can't really get enough of. And when I listen to like a couple songs from it, I have to just listen to the whole thing. Loaded is great too. So yes. Stone Temple Pilots, I grew up with this band, and I like Core a lot, their first album. I like Tiny Music a lot, but Purple is maybe one of my favorite albums from the 90s. I think it's got a lot of really great guitar chords. What I mean by that is Dean DeLeo, dude, is extremely good at Zeppelin-esque guitar playing, and there's always some really interesting like pull musically with the chord choice, and the fucking bass is great. Scott Weiland sounds his best here, where he doesn't sound too much like Eddie Vedder, but he still sounds like classic Weiland. Just before, I think, sadly, he kind of started getting bad, and because of drugs and stuff. But no, I mean, the songwriting is top notch, and the sound of this album is great. Can't recommend it enough. Same for Soundgarden, which I like a little bit better. Super Unknown is the most famous Soundgarden album because it's got Black Hole Sun on it and like Spoon Man. So, not much to say other than it is, to me, one of those quintessential 90s albums that is worth listening to all the way through, especially because there's some good deep cuts on it. So, what's that song? There's one in particular. I can't think of the name of it. There's one in particular that like not a lot of people know of if you only know the singles, that I think is one of their best. So in terms of songs, you have, where is it? Track listing. You got My Wave, Fell on Black Days, Black Hole Sun, Spoon Man. you know, The Day I Tried to Live, all amazing. Like Suicide is also incredible. 4th of July, Limo Wreck. So yes, good album from Soundgarden. Alice in Chains. So this is the 90s corner. Dirt is my probably, I don't know if it's my favorite. I might have Jar of Flies on here, but yeah, Dirt is, to me, that's their best, because again, there's songs like Dirt and Junkhead that are so perfectly Alice in Chains that aren't exactly singles. So there's that, there's Them Bones, Rain When I Die, Rooster, Angry Chair, Wood. Wait, is Wood on this, or is it a special edition? Because I thought Wood was on a later album. I just want to check. See, now my memory is not so great for these things. But perfect Alice in Chains representation. Wood's on. If you haven't listened to Alice in Chains, Dirt is a good starting place. Talking Heads, Fear of Music. It's their 3rd album. I love it. I have the vinyl, and I enjoy songs like Cities. And I think Life During Wartime is on here. Just all the way through. Fucking good Talking Heads album. Good representation of what they would do just between like starting Talking Heads and like weird experimental Talking Heads. I think it's like a great balance. And the songs, I like every song on this album easily. Pixies, Surfer Rosa, probably their heaviest, most bizarre album, and that's saying a lot for a band like the Pixies. Where Is My Mind is on this album, but to me, that, again, I don't really get sick of that song, but I'm going to say that it's the other songs that, like, the energy on this album is unmatched by most bands, and Bone Machine, Break My Body, Something Against You, shit like that. All really great sound, and it's only 34 minutes. And there's like 13 songs. So Bowie loved the Pixies, Cobain loved the Pixies, Radiohead, REM. A lot of people like them Pixies. And Surfer Rosa is a good album for that. Queen, Night at the Opera, Bohemian Rhapsody is on this. What more should I say? It's got Freddie Mercury. It's got the band at their best. But there's also songs like Seaside Rendezvous, which are fun. And I'd recommend this album as a starting point for Queen if you want to listen to their full albums. The harmonies are incredible. The guitar is incredible. And the hits on this album, I think You're My Best Friend is on this album. However, I'm going to say Death on Two Legs. Death on Two Legs is probably my favorite Queen song, and that's the first song on this album. So, Good Company's good too. Paul McCartney, Ram. This is my favorite of the McCartney solo albums. It's just, it's weird. It's a kind of a fuck you, but also it's got, to me, the catchiest, most interesting songs. And it's a whole album kind of thing. You listen to one, you got to go through the whole thing. Too Many People, that starting track, is one of my favorite McCartney songs. And Admiral Halsey's great. Ram. Yeah. I mean, it's got more of a reputation. It kind of was panned when it first came out by the other Beatles and the press. But now I think it has the reputation it deserves. And it kind of almost it inspired a lot of indie rock. So my favorite Soundgarden is Bad Motorfinger. Because this album is their, again, in between them becoming more commercial and being just raw, like fucking heavy. So, I probably spelled that wrong. I think it's all just one word, actually. But yeah, this one I have on vinyl. It's got Rusty Cage, Outshine, Slaves and Bulldozers, Jesus Christ Pose. Just to name a few. Those ones in particular I love, but the whole album is great. It's just heavy and fucked. Heavy and fucked. So then you go to more 90s, Nirvana, Unplugged in New York. This album got me into music. And as such, it's a little low on the list. This is how I got into Nirvana and guitar music. So, you know, it's quiet. It shows a really interesting side to Nirvana. They could do acoustic. They could turn their heavier songs into acoustic. And I think Kurt, even though he was zonked, apparently, he did a really amazing job. And his voice, I think it was his best it's ever been. Everyone, you know, talks about the Cobain scream, which is amazing. I mean, how does he do it, right? Aside from rip his throat up. He has a great tone to his scream. and it's you know, it doesn't sound forced. It just sounds real. I don't know. But his singing tone on this album, I like just the tone of his voice. I think it's amazing. And the band sounds good, and I like that the guitars don't have new strings. They sound like they're old shitty strings, and it works so much better for this album. And I love the Meat Puppet songs too on that album. Like almost better than the Nirvana ones. So the full name of this album is The Kinks or the Village Green Preservation Society. The Kinks were kind of underrated compared to the Beatles because the Beatles got all the fame, and also the Kinks kind of got banned in the US for some random shit. Like, there's a whole story about that I'd recommend looking up. It's weird. This album has got a lot of good... It's a theme, it's a concept album. But I'll tell you what, it's catchy. The music, sadly, the mixing, because it's like kind of not the best sounding album from the 60s, but it doesn't really matter to me. I love Picture Book, Johnny Thunder, Animal Farm is great, Village Green, Starstruck, Phenomenal Cat, all the way through. It's just a great album. It's a cool concept album and one that I enjoy. So I got the Beatle on here, Rubber Soul. Rubber Soul is like kind of almost a transitory album from Help to Revolver to Sgt. Pepper. So it's kind of a mix right in the middle of old Beatle and new Beatle. But I think the songwriting on Rubber Soul, the evolution is great. And, you know, lyrically they're talking about a whole bunch of other things that aren't just like sappy love songs, which they had already started doing. But in this case, you get Norwegian Wood, you get I'm Looking Through You, you get In My Life. I think the US version has 2 more songs. But, let's see. Drive My Car... No, that's not... That's on Revolver. Isn't it? Let's see. I thought... Drive My Car... Oh, no, Drive My Car is on Rubber Soul. That's another one I love. The Word. Yeah, good album. Just a really cool album. Again, nice acoustic kind of vibe to it that really cement. It's the Pot album. The Stooges, Iggy Pop. This is like proto-punk, and it sounds like shit. It sounds live, which is hard to do for an album you do in the studio. And Iggy sounds the best he ever did, vocally. The songs are like, they just hit, and they're heavy, and they're sometimes a little sloppy, but also very catchy. This to me is a great album for its time because it's so fucking heavy and different from other stuff. So much so that it influenced so many people later on, like the Ramones and the Clash and stuff, to do their heavy shit. So I love the Stooges, but Funhouse is my favorite. I got 9 Inch Nails' The Fragile. It's a double album. I'm not as crazy about the second half, but I think the first half is so strong. It's a little, these days some would call it like gothish or emo-ish, because it does get a little depressing, but it doesn't really bother me. The Day the Whole World Went Away, The Frail, The Wretched, We're in This Together Now, Even Deeper, The Great Below, these are some of my favorites. Starfuckers Inc., Starfuckers Inc., everybody. Complication. Yeah, this is an album that is worth listening in headphones all the way through. I think it's Trent Reznor at his best, pretty much. I got Plastic Beach on here from Gorillaz. I like this album a lot. The guest stars are great, but it's a good balance of Damon plus guest stars. It kind of works together really nicely. It's got a cool electronic sound to it, but not like techno. It's just weird. Like, I love the song Plastic Beach itself. I love Stylo and the video for it. Big fan of the Lou Reed song, Some Kind of Nature. And then Empire Ants. I mean, there's so many. Superfast Jellyfish. Good mix of pop and also just some stuff that is like so out of left field. It's fantastic. I put another compilation. This is the only Stones album I have on here. And don't get me wrong, I love Exile on Main Street. I love Let It Bleed. And Aftermath is great. But I just got the vinyl for Hot Rocks, and I've been listening to it again. This was the album that got me into the Stones, and one of the albums that got me into classic rock along with Jimi Hendrix. This, to me, is the perfect representation of this band. It's even got a couple deep cuts on it. So it's not just the greatest hits, but every song is great. They all work well together. And you got Paint It Black on here. You have 19th Nervous Breakdown, Time Is On My Side, Heart of Stone. And then you go into like Midnight Rambler live. So interesting choices and the perfect encapsulation of what made the Stones great up until the early 70s. Still, though, Exile is amazing, and there's plenty of stuff that isn't on this album that I like, but let's continue. The White Stripes Elephant. I put Elephant because it has my favorite songs on it. Not just that, but it's also the most consistent White Stripes album. I actually like Get Behind Me, Satan. That was my first Stripes album. And I think it's got some problems, but it's a cool album. That said, Elephant feels the most consistent conceptually, but also just the songs are great. It's got Seven Nation Army on it. It's got Hardest Button to Button. We're Gonna Be Friends is not on this album, I don't think. I'm gonna find out right now because I forgot. I also like White Blood Cells and Distilge or Distile or however you pronounce it. They're all real. There's a lot of great White Stripes albums, honestly. I don't think they put out a bad album, but Elephant not only has the biggest hits, but the sound is cool. Like Black Math is great. And Air Near My Fingers, no. We're Gonna Be Friends is not on this album. Ball and Biscuit is, though. So yeah, that's my White Stripes. I would also say, you know what I don't have on here? The Raconteurs. Because I'm not into their full albums entirely. I think if you did the best of the Raconteurs of the first three of their only three albums, you'd have an amazing album. Neil Young, Rust Never Sleeps. I got really into this album this year. It's mostly acoustic to start, and then it gets heavier and heavier as it goes. It is late 70s Neil Young, starting with Hey Hey My My. Then you have Pocahontas. It's so good. There's so many. Every song is great, but also the way it builds works really well, and it's kind of a live album. What I mean by that is they recorded most of the stuff live, like to an audience, and then did overdubs later. But not extensive overdubs. Just perfect. There's something about this album starting and ending with Hey Hey My My that I just love. It feels right. And there's something about that song in particular, and then the way it builds to the heavier songs that makes this maybe the best Neil Young. If you told me this was your favorite Neil Young, I wouldn't argue. But then I have Harvest. And the reason I have Harvest a little higher than Rust is because you have all the hits. You have Old Man, Heart of Gold. You know, those are the ones people know. But there's Out on the Weekend. You have stuff like that. It's much more produced. And I think after Harvest, Neil Young was like, I don't want to produce the albums too much. I want them to be a little raw. Because this one sounds like a big studio album. And he kind of held off on like the perfection of this album for a while. And he eventually did it again. But no, this album is still fantastic. There's only a couple songs that don't really do it for me. But Needle in the Damage Done, Alabama. Yeah, this is a good one. But I think it's tough to choose. I almost made Rust go a little bit above it. But no, I stuck with that. Pearl Jam 10, one of the first tapes I ever had. One of my first albums, 90s, obviously early 90s. I like Versus. I even like Vitology, but I do think 10 is their best album still. And you get that. Some people don't like. I think Eddie sounds his best on this album, especially his scream. And I don't think that they ever really kind of surpassed this because it just has the best songs. Just all the way through. Just the best songs. Sure, you got Even Flow, Alive, Jeremy. But everything. Like Ocean. So many good ones. And I think this helped define the sound of the 90s to the point where the Imitators retroactively kind of semi-ruined this album. REM, Automatic for the People. I almost made this my favorite REM album because it's got my favorite REM song, Find the River, but it's also got Man in the Moon, Sidewinder Sleeps Tonight, Drive, Night Swimming. It's a phenomenal album. A little commercial. I have no problem with commercial. I like albums that sound polished, that have good, catchy songs on them. And so Automatic really works for me. And I love it. Police, Synchronicity. So the thing about Synchronicity is it's not a raw album. It's, again, one of those albums that's like overly produced. It's their last of 5 albums. And I think the reason I like this album the best of all the Police albums is simply because it's got my favorite songs on it. I do like the sound of it, but here are my favorites. King of Pain, Wrapped Around Your Finger, Murder by Numbers, Synchronicity 2, and I even really like Synchronicity 1. And then the album has a song called Walking in Your Footsteps, which has one of my favorite lyrics of all time. Ready? It's so dumb. Hey, mighty Brontosaurus, don't you have a lesson for us? You thought your rule would always last. There were no lessons in your past. Here's one. Hey, Mr. Dinosaur, you couldn't really ask for more. You were God's favorite creature, but you didn't have a future. Fuck you, Sting. That said, there's a couple songs on this album I skip. So, but still, man, when you get to King of Pain and then Murder by Numbers, God, it's so good. Talking Heads, Remain in Light. Here's another Talking Heads album. This is the most Brian Eno-y and weirdest, and this album kind of changed a lot of things for them, and they ended up doing Once in a Lifetime on this album, but it's not that reason. I like Born Under Punches. I like... Oh God, what was the name of it? See, this always happens. I should know the names of these albums because I listen to them so much, but... Or the names of the songs. The sound of this album is very loop and sample based, but also the way the guitar sounds and the way the bass sounds and David Byrne's voice, it sounds like a rock album mixed with something else. I don't know how to explain it. It is their most... To me, it's their weirdest album, and that's why I like it. Cross-Eyed and Painless, that's the one. Houses in Motion is another one that I think is totally underrated. Phenomenal work. Here's David Bowie, Ziggy Stardust. It's a little low on my list, you'd imagine, and I love it, and it's what got me into Bowie, and it was one of my first classic rock albums, but I do think I enjoy the weirder stuff later, and the more deep, interesting, introspective stuff. That said, for glam rock, it doesn't get better than this. I mean, T-Rex gets close. I love Ziggy Stardust. I love Lady Stardust. I love 5 Years, Rock and Roll Suicide. Not a bad song on the album. And Ziggy could easily be top Bowie. And if you told me this was your favorite Bowie, I'd be like, yeah, no, fine. Yes. So, oh, Moon Age Daydream. I mean, how do you choose? I put the Black Keys Brothers above David Bowie? What? Alright, well, the thing about it is I'd probably change that. And, hang on a second here. Let me just do a quick thing. Yeah, okay. Okay, hang on. Almost ready. Just bear with me. That makes more sense. Okay, so the Black Keys Brothers. Why is this on the list so high? I don't know. I just love it. I think it's their best songs. It's, great, catchy songs, but also some stuff that kind of makes me sad, like Unknown Brother. Especially the story behind it. But just the music itself is really good. It's just, to me, this is like the perfect garage rock plus production record. And the songwriting and Dan's voice and the guitar, all of it's great. Everlasting Light, The Only One, Too Afraid to Love You, 10 Cent Pistol, Sinister Kid. It's not even the singles necessarily. That's the thing that's crazy about it. It's all the ones that aren't the main singles that I like. And when an album can have deep cuts that are that good, I don't know, it means a lot to me. So Stone Roses' first album, I almost put this higher. This is like kind of in some ways the birth of Britpop, and it doesn't sound like Britpop though. It's got a really cool story, but the thing I love about this album is the drums, the guitar, the bass, the vocals. Ian Brown's vocals are kind of back a little bit, which is fine because he's a kind of low-key vocalist. It's the songwriting, Made of Stone, stuff like I don't know, I really like Waterfalls. I like I Want to Be Adored. And then I Am the Resurrection is one of my favorite songs ever made. Listen to it and you'll understand why this album is on the list. Could be higher. Beck, Morning Phase. This album really caught me off guard. I didn't think he would be able to get close to Sea Change again. This is a more acoustic, kind of almost ambient at times, but expansively beautiful album. It sounds like a morning in the woods somewhere, like in a nice kind of like cottage somewhere in Woodstock, New York or something. I think it's a really great album. It won a Grammy and Kanye was pissed, but I think it's some of his best songwriting in the past 20 years or 15 years, I'll say. And I come back to it a lot, especially if I'm not looking to like listen to a loud album. So here's my Nine Inch Nails Downward Spiral. I almost, you know what's not on the list is Wish. Or Broken, rather. Sorry, Broken. That is a loud, crazy album that scared me as a kid, and it could be up here, but I think Downward Spiral is his masterpiece. He's got multiple masterpieces, but I do think Downward Spiral is still the best, and it's an album I listen to a lot, and it really does sound amazing and have some of his best songwriting. And it gets dark. Obviously, you know the song Closer, but it's not just about that. There's a lot of other ones on this album that I really like, especially the more ambient ones. There's like Mr. Self-Destruct, of course. Heresy is amazing, but then you have like The Becoming, A Warm Place, which is very Bowie inspired. I love that. Ending with Hurt, yeah, it's very good. So REM, Document. Almost chose this as my favorite REM, but this one's got a lot of singles. It's guitar-wise, it's pretty heavy for them. And when I got into this album, I was convinced it was their best. But as time has settled, it might be. It might be their best. It's not my favorite. But to me, there's no... I mean, the only song I don't really love is maybe the song Strange. But it's got The One I Love. It's got The End of the World. As I Know It, you know that one. But I love the first three songs in particular. So, would recommend Document to first-time REM fans. XTC, Skylarking. I almost put Drums and Wires on the list, but again, ran out of room. Skylarking, though, to me, this is like a 60s album made in the 80s. It's beautiful. Summer's Cauldron, The Meeting Place, Grass in particular. Just so good. 10,000 Umbrellas. XTC were an amazing 80s band, late 70s, 80s. They kind of fit the new wave thing, and then they went weirdly psychedelic. And like the production on this album is just it's vast. It's very good. It's ear candy, I would say, and it has some of my favorite songs of theirs. Andy Partridge, one of the best songwriters of his time, and I'd recommend Skylarking. I got really obsessed with it. I played it a lot on my streams. Queens of the Stone Age, Like Clockwork. This album hits me, and it hit me really hard when it first came out, and it still does. It's not my favorite of theirs, but it's damn close. I think it's one of the best modern rock albums. Famously, Josh Homme was struggling with life and death at one point, and lots of other stuff, and it really shows on this album. I Appear Missing is an example of that, but yeah, all of it, every song is great. So, I mean, some people like the heavier sound of the other albums, and I do too, but to me, this one has its own unique kind of thing in their discography, and I love it. So now I have Beck Sea Change, which is a very sad album. He made it after a particularly intense breakup, and it shows. And it's great. It really does hit pretty hard, and the songs are beautiful. It's a weird mix of beautiful and depressing, but hopeful. And I don't think very many albums do it as good as this. So speaking of dark, beautiful, depressing, Elliott Smith, just any of his stuff, there's no bad Elliott Smith. I mean, he himself wouldn't have described his songs as depressing. He did acoustic songs a lot, and then when he got, more electric, it was much more like, you can hear, like, it's still like dark, but much more upbeat. I happen to like music that sounds a little dark, and Elliott Smith was one of the best at it. Dude was like one of the best songwriters, truthfully, and he was able to put these songs down. In his documentary, his old band Heat Miser was like, we didn't know he could go to the next level, which is why we had to let him go and do his things on his own, because he was able to take it to the next level and we really couldn't. And that's, to me, what he was so good at, was just the purely grabbing these songs from wherever they came from and doing them justice. And they're catchy and great, and the lyrics are nice. You got Tomorrow Tomorrow, Waltz Number 2, Independence Day. On this album, Sweet Adeline, A Question Mark I really like, Everybody Cares, Everybody Understands. So I'm not going to just read all the songs, but this is a good one. Wilco could have been higher. This is their most famous album, and truthfully, it took me years to get into every song, because I always liked one or two. And the thing about this album is, it is a grower, but it also is a shower. Like, it can start, you can listen to it and you'd be like, oh, I like that song Heavy Metal Drummer, and I like Pot Kettle Black, but the rest of it didn't really sink in. But over time, for me, the whole album just totally sunk in. It really kind of captures a moment in time, especially Ashes of American Flags. It was written before 9/11, and somehow people are like, wait, how did he do that? Listen to it and you'll understand. But to me, Poor Places, Reservations, Pot Kettle Black, I Am Trying to Break Your Heart, and Jesus, etc. Those are the ones I love the most. Another Elliott Smith on here, Either Or, which I like a little bit better than XO. I tried not to do too many repeats of albums from artists. Like, I try not to go too crazy, but honestly, I kind of had to. Especially for this one, which has got Alameda, Ballad of Big Nothing, Between the Bars, Pictures of Me I love in particular. Cupid's Trick, it's like the Joker's Trick, Angelus. So yeah, another great acoustic album, but with a little bit more of an electric flair at times. Beck, Odelay, one of my first CDs. It's another album I can listen to from start to finish. It's weird because it's like kind of hillbilly hip-hop rock. I don't know how to explain it better than that, but it's it's an album you can kind of dance to. You can listen to for introspection. It's weird. The lyrics don't make a lot of sense most of the time, but it's got Where It's At, New Pollution. But some of the ones I love are like Hot Wax, Lord Only Knows, Devil's Haircut. So yeah, I love Odelay. Still holds up. Still my favorite Beck album. The Kinks, Lola vs. Power Man. Truthfully, a lot of Kinks albums could be on here, but I got this one and the other one. Lola vs. Power Man's got Lola on it. This album was basically the soundtrack to Wes Anderson's Darjeeling Limited, and it's all really cool. You got Strangers, Denmark Street, Lola, Top of the Pops. This Time Tomorrow in particular, listen to that one. This Time Tomorrow is great. Power Man, Gotta Be Free. Ape Man, Long Way From Home. To me, that album is just it's a weird like kind of mix of, it kind of sounds a little bit like their Abbey Road mixed with like a Rubber Soul, and all the songs are great, showing to me that they are one of the best bands ever. Speaking of Radiohead, Kid A. Every Radiohead album could be on my top 100, but I put 3. And I'm going to say Kid A sometimes is my favorite Radiohead album. At the moment, it is not, because it has to be listened to in a very specific mood. And I do think it's probably their most interesting. I think it's their most experimental. It hits and cuts me the deepest, especially How to Disappear Completely. Optimistic is one of my favorite rock songs ever. But yet there's a couple songs on here that are more ambient. I have to be really in a specific mood for them. So to me, it doesn't... it's not an everyday album, but when I'm in the mood for it, there's almost nothing better. And I do think it's one of the best left turns in rock music history. And I love Morning Bell and all the other textures that are there's something about this album that's weirdly electronic. Well, not weirdly, it's electronic, but also it's kind of rock, but also it's kind of just beep boop. So it's beep boop depression music, and I like that. Abbey Road's a little low. It's the one that was played in my house the most, and I hate Maxwell's Silver Hammer, so that's a shame. Otherwise, I think this album is almost perfect, and the medley is amazing. The most recent mix from Giles Martin I like even better than the original for some of the songs. But starting with Come Together, you have George at his best on this album with Here Comes the Sun and Something. Paul doing his weird medley shit. Even Ringo has a great song. Octopus's Garden is fantastic. So yeah, it's Abbey Road. What more can be said? It almost should be higher. I got the Doors debut. This is another debut album that's great. And don't get me wrong, I love Waiting for the Sun and Morrison Hotel, like scattered songs throughout the Doors. You know what? People Are Strange is another Doors album that I might like even a little better than this sometimes, but I do think their first album was their most consistent and best album, and I think as a debut it's kind of fucking amazing that they came out the gate like this, fully like formed. You have Jim sounding amazing, knowing his voice perfectly. The lyrics are weird already and interesting. Again, Jim gets a lot of credit for being like this prophet. He was not really. I mean, he just smoked, just weed and drugs. I mean, it is that too, but there's something about the Doors that just people like mystify it. And I think it was a product of the 60s. But Break On Through, The Crystal Ship, 20th Century Fox, Light My Fire, The End in particular, The End of the Night. Great album. Great debut. Mars Volta, Francis the Mute. I think it should be... There we go. I love this album, and I don't know why entirely, because it is so... I'm not even a prog guy. Like, prog rock does not usually do it for me. But this album came out at the right time in my life, and maybe I was smoking a little... Nothing in particular while this album... Like, at that time, that's when I was in that mindset. I'm sorry to say it like that, because people are going to be like, Seth Rogen, dude, weed. But the truth is, there's something about that, the time this came out, and the way I listened to it, which was just in headphones for the very first time, with my eyes closed, just absorbing it. And it was like one of the most powerful musical experiences I've ever had. I mean that. It's bizarre to say it like that, but it's true. Some of the songs are just noises and lots of like downtime, but if you can appreciate that stuff and listen to it as a full thing, it really works. And the singles are good too. Like The Widow and Lavia. How'd this happen? Well, we got Wilco here again. So, that's weird. Alright, now you got a preview of the next ones, but what I will say is, Wilco snuck onto my list twice. Weird. Talking Heads, more songs about buildings and food. This is actually my favorite Talking Heads album, because it is kind of, like, new wavy and, like, kind of not perfect. The songs are good. I like the way the guitars sound. It's got Take Me to the River on it, but again, there's the songs I like on this are the ones that aren't exactly hits. Like With Our Love is really good. I love Warning Sign, Found a Job in particular. Just a really cool album I can listen to all the way through, and I think it's my favorite Talking Heads. I got Floyd, Wish You Were Here at 22. I mean, at times I would consider this the best album. Again, have to be in a mood though. The songs Welcome to the Machine, Wish You Were Here, and Have a Cigar are fantastic songs and work as singles, but then when you get to Shine On You Crazy Diamond and how much of it there is, that's where I have to kind of be in the right mood to listen, because there's so much noodling. It's beautiful, and it's great, and it's wistful, but, you know, it's a mood thing. Zeppelin 4. So this is my Zeppelin 4 spot, which is 21. Truthfully, Zeppelin 4 could have been in the top 10. And a lot more Zeppelin could have been on this list. Zeppelin 1 is another amazing debut. Zeppelin 2 is also great. 3 is great. Houses of the Holy is great. Shit. It's hard to choose, and I even like In Through the Outdoor quite a bit. But 4 is, you know, legendary. It's got When the Levee Breaks, Stairway. It's got Rock and Roll, Black Dog, you know. But I like Going to California, Misty Mountain Hop. And I like Battle of Evermore. Like, I like when it gets kind of mystical and weird and, you know, Lord of the Ringsy. Still, though, phenomenal album. I got Gorillaz' Demon Days on this list at number 20, even above Zeppelin, and that's maybe a mistake, but did I have Demon Days somewhere else on this list? No, I don't think I did. Well, what can I say? What can I say about Demon Days? It's my favorite Gorillaz. It's my favorite Damon. And I think the guest stars, again, great choice of guest stars. Obviously, you got Feel Good Inc., but, you know, November has come. I like Don't Get Lost in Heaven. It's my favorite conceptual album they've ever done, but also has the best singles like Kids with Guns, Oh Green World, Dirty Harry. I mean, it's all good. El Mañana. No bad songs. I mean, maybe White Light I'm not really into, you know, and then Dennis Hopper doing Fire Coming Out of the Monkey's Head. It's a strange album if you really think about it, but it's got the right amount, again, good balance between Damon and guest stars, which I feel like they struggled with later in their career. And it's got the strongest songwriting, the best singles, the best videos, the best lore. Love that. Love that shit. My favorite REM is Green, which some people will give me a little shit for. Because Green is a little poppy. You know? It's not their deepest album. But the reason I like it is because there's a song on there called Stand. And that happens to be a very hopelessly catchy song. But in particular, Pop Song 89, Get Up, you have Orange Crush. The last song is really good. I Remember California. No bad songs. And to me, it's REM at their most REM. It's a good mix of early and later REM. You get some mandolin in there, and just, like, incredibly catchy, great songs. I think it's maybe not their best, but I think it's my favorite. Now, I love Out of Time, which has Losing My Religion on it as well. And that's another poppy song. But the problem with that album is it's got Shiny Happy People on it, so nope. I also really enjoy Life's Rich Pageant. I like the album New Adventures in Hi-Fi, which is a later album. But, you know, people do feel like REM's best stuff is their first, second, and third, and fourth album. And I don't disagree with that. I just happen to like Green the best. So, Queens of the Stone Age, Songs for the Deaf. For you. It's great. Got Mark Lanegan on it. It's them at their heaviest in some ways, but also the best songs, simple songs, good vocals. You can fucking toss this on while you're driving. You can toss it on while you're just sitting, while you're standing. I can't get enough of this album, and I come back to it somewhat frequently, and I don't think they ever topped it. So, I want to just give you a couple songs. I like Hanging Tree. Obviously Go With The Flow and all that stuff. No One Knows is like my least favorite on it, just because I've heard it so much. But here's one. Do It Again. God Is In The Radio. Mosquito Song in particular. Fuck, that song is good. Hanging Tree, I mentioned Sky Is Falling. So yeah. Devo. Are we not men? We are Devo. Here's another, talk about weird. So yeah, new wave at its best. Another debut album, and the songs on it, it doesn't have Whip It on it. It's got Space Junk and a lot of other shit that people maybe don't know, like Gut Feeling. The way the album sounds is so perfectly complementary to how weird these songs are. And the cover of Satisfaction it's a good way to make a statement about what kind of music they make. But, yeah, it's just all the way through. Just enjoy the album a lot. And again, it makes me want to wear a hat made of fake bricks. I got Nirvana, In Utero. This is my favorite Nirvana album, and considering Nirvana is the band that got me into music, I'm going to put In Utero up here. Nevermind is not on my list. And Nevermind should be on my list because I think it is a almost perfect album start to finish. But that's the thing, it's a little too perfect. And simply because I can't really listen to it as much because I know the songs inside and out. I've heard them a million times. They've been done on rock radio a million times. And that kind of takes it away from me a little bit. Whereas In Utero is a little bit more fucked up. There's a couple songs on here that you don't hear on the radio that aren't shoved down your throat. Like Serve the Servants. I love the song Dumb. That's me. And there's also Francis Farmer Will Have a Revenge on Seattle. Radio-friendly unit shifter. It's heavy. It's raw. I know what Kurt was going through at the time from what I've read. But hearing this album, you can almost get a really vivid picture of how fucked up things were for him. And it's just Grohl is a beast on it. The mixing by Albini is great. They wanted to get it like Surfer Rosa. They got it. They got that. So yeah. Okay. Pink Floyd, The Wall. At one time, this was my favorite Floyd. It might be. It might return to that. And the reason I like it is because there's so much. It's just there's a couple songs on here that like kind of paint a picture and tell the story. Where I feel like the ones that I like the best are like Thin Ice and, In the Flesh. Hey You. It does get a little bit, in the second half, it can get a little bit like, the energy kind of like dissipates a bit. But I still love Waiting for the Worms and, when they get the Beach Boys harmonies. The concept is really good and it's almost a little edgy to like The Wall because, well, I got a wall too, bro. But not really. I feel like it's very hopeful. It's very honest. And sadly, Rick Wright is not at his best on this album. But Gilmour, just before, the band became totally Roger Waters, Gilmour still shines on this album with his guitar and voice, and his vocals. And to me, this is Waters' like best concept, best lyrics, pretty much. And I come back to it every now and then, and it just, I don't know, it just works. Especially love Goodbye Blue Sky. I got Elliott Smith Figure 8 Above the Wall, which I feel a little weird about in retrospect. But again, this list isn't 100% unmovable. It's close to exactly... It's close to how I want it, but at the same time, things do change in my head a little bit. Like, oh, maybe Figure 8 should be somewhere at like 17, 18, 19, somewhere in there. So, but I do love this album, start to finish. It's experimental for Elliott Smith. It's plugged in. Some people are like, oh, it's not acoustic. He sold out. But I do think it proved that he could do a big rock album and still keep his music indelibly himself. I love the song Junk Bond Trader, Son of Sam, somebody that I used to know. L.A. is great. Stupidity Tries, Easy Way, all of it. Literally all the album. It's so good. And if you haven't heard this album, there is a reason it's in my top 20, even if 14 I think is a little generous. I got Television, Marquee Moon, late 70s. If you haven't heard of Television, I don't know if you'd describe them as new wave. or like whatever the fuck the Talking Heads could be considered. I'm gonna see what they're considered on Wikipedia. That will help me. American rock band television. American rock band from New York City. Early fixture of CBGB New York 70s rock scene. They're considered influential in the development of punk and alternative music. Well, to me, Marquee Moon is almost as perfect as you can get an album. It was their first one, and every song is good, and there's also the song Marquee Moon, which is about 10 minutes, and I can listen to this album, anytime. I especially love Guiding Light and Elevation, but if you haven't heard Marquee Moon, it really does hit all the right notes. It's a good mix of, alternative rock. It's got, a little bit of an indie style, but also feels polished. It's great. Pixies, Doolittle. Hugely important album. Pixies Bossa Nova could easily be on this list, too, and truthfully, I probably should have included it. I got one more space on the list now that I removed the double Wilco, so I'll tell you what, Pixies Bossa Nova, somewhere in the 90s. But Doolittle, to me, it's their most creative. It is their most polished pop album, and yet it definitely goes into these weird fucking lyrics, and it hits like Gouge Away really cuts. The album is a perfect, start to finish. Every song works together. They're short songs, and they feel like their pacing is perfect. There's not a note wasted on this album. And again, you have songs like Here Comes Your Man, which are kind of popular, and we're in Rock Band or Rocksmith and all that. But for me, Doolittle shines when you go a little deeper into it, like the song I Bleed, Mr. Greaves, Crackety Jones, Number 13 Baby, Gouge Away. And then you have Monkey Gone to Heaven. Not a bad song on this album. And these days, everyone is remixing Where Is My Mind, but I've heard the song Hey. The song Hey was in the new Suicide Squad movie, so people know about the Pixies. They influenced a lot of bands, and truthfully, still one of my favorite bands of all time. So Doolittle is the best starting point for the Pixies, I think. David Bowie Low, the first of his Berlin trilogy. At one point, it was my favorite Bowie album, but again, I can listen to it, but it can be a little dark for me, so I like to listen to it at certain times. Though I love the experimentation on this album, I like that half of it, Bowie's not even singing, and his songwriting and the ambient stuff with Brian Eno just shines. It really has this kind of, it's almost like an ancient, sometimes it feels like you're going through ancient ruins, but when it isn't, it's kind of Kraftwerk. It's got some interesting synthesizer sounds, interesting drum sounds. There's a whole big story about how they got the snare to sound on this album the way they did. But definitely Kraftwerk inspired hugely. Bowie at his lowest point, hence the title. And I think that the pretension and the big star of Bowie, of who he was, the Ziggy Stardust, into Young Americans, into, the Diamond Dogs and all this stuff. He throws all that out with this album. And the songs are really good, but also they cut. And I think that that's what I like about it. It's just him shedding all of that shit and just trying to find something pure within himself musically. And it's great. And again, it's also, it pushes his genre, and it kind of pushed some of the, stuff that Kraftwerk was doing to the masses. Very influential, great album. A lot of Bowie could be on this list, and I'll talk about that in a second. I got Radiohead and Rainbows on this list because this was my first Radiohead album that I fell in love with, completely. No bad songs. I have it on vinyl. I listened to it, start to finish as much as any other album I've ever owned, maybe more. It's got a unique feel. It's not too heavy of an album, but it's not totally acoustic, and it's not as experimental as Kid A. It's just beautiful. The name is perfect. It strikes a perfect balance of rock Radiohead and experimental Radiohead. And like I said, a lot of Radiohead could be on this list along with Bowie. Beach Boys' Pet Sounds makes me sad, and that's a good thing. It's the Beach Boys. It's all bright and colorful. But this album in particular, it makes me sad because it's so raw, and you have Brian Wilson with his beautiful voice writing these songs, and then you find out that the other guys didn't like it, especially Mike Love. And it's him really bearing his soul. Not only that, it influenced and inspired the Beatles. It helped change pop music and rock music. And to me, I can listen to this and get some happiness out of it, especially for like Wouldn't It Be Nice, Sloop John B. But then just as much, there are songs on here that really just fucking pour my emotions out. And I'd recommend it if you haven't really heard it. It's old. It doesn't sound necessarily old. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it sounds its age. But to me, I think this is almost like an evergreen album. Then you have the Beatles' Revolver, which I put over here because I do think I like Revolver more than Pet Sounds. And Revolver is one of those albums that kind of transitioned the Beatles into the weird mode that later would become, Pepper, an album later, and then Magical Mystery Tour. It's in between Rubber Soul and Pepper, and it sounds like that. There are songs like Taxman on here, Tomorrow Never Knows, or is it Tomorrow Never Dies? That's the Bond movie, right? It's a good album all the way through. No bad songs, and a lot of good George songs on here too. And Paul not being as chipper as usual, which I like about that. It's Paul writing some bitter, depressing songs. But still, this pushed forward music, I respect the fuck out of it as much as I enjoy listening to it. Neil Young on the Beach is my favorite Neil Young. It definitely speaks to me on a personal level in a lot of ways with stuff that I've been through and continue to go through, and and some of the hells that I make for myself. And that's kind of like Neil Young was the victim of his own success. More so on this album, you kind of learn about that. Especially the last 3 songs. And I feel like the On the Beach thing is just kind of a piss take. It's like, oh, look at me. I just was super successful. I'm super famous now because of Harvest. Now I'm living on the beach. And the album sounds it was recorded with him and the members, I think drinking and eating this honey weed that was THC infused honey, and it really sounds like it. I think it's his most honest yet musically interesting album, and sometimes you just love an album and you can't exactly explain why, and that's On the Beach for me. I got Radiohead OK Computer at number 6, above In Rainbows even, because I do think it's one of the best albums ever made. Not just because I was young when the album came out, and I remember the songs on TV, on MTV. But, these days when I listen to it, I get something different out of it than I did when I was listening to it 10 years ago and even 15 years ago. It's just almost perfect. I love the way the album sounds. And it does a good balance between heavier and softer songs. There's a concept. It's almost overrated, but I don't get bored of this one. That's the thing about it. Even the B-sides that they released on the OK Not OK were all really good. This is a band, really at the height of their power, and I fucking love it. Subterranean Homesick Alien, The Tourist, No Surprises, Karma Police. It's all really good, but I love those. And Airbag. So my favorite Bowie is Station to Station. So I will say Radiohead, The Bends, Moonshaped Pool those albums are great. I like Amnesiac for what it is, and I like Hail to the Thief. These are albums that if I went for a top 200, or if I was going to do multiple, more than a couple albums per band, I would have no choice but to include them because I love them so much. Bowie is much the same. Station to Station is my favorite Bowie because he doesn't remember making it. And it kind of shows. The song Station to Station is one of my favorite songs ever made. It's long. It's like 10 minutes. Goes through a number of different styles, and yet every time I can listen to the whole thing all the way through and really get something out of it. The rest of the songs are some of them are so hilariously melodramatic, I can't help but laugh. But then his skill with the arrangements and his voice really, it makes it like it takes it to the next level for me. And you could tell he was burning out, and he turned that into this character, the Thin White Duke. He was not in his right mind at this time, and the cocaine and bell peppers are to prove this information. But I do think he was able to turn this, without him even remembering it, into like the perfect piece of overblown nonsense, yet still listenable and incredibly poignant for its time. And I love it. It's just a phenomenal work of whatever it is, and I can't get enough of it. Though that said, like I said with Radiohead, I could easily get Aladdin Sane on this list somewhere. I could get Man Who Sold the World, because I love that album too. Some people would say that the best Bowie album is Hunky Dory, and I don't disagree with that. Like it should be on my list. You know what? That would maybe be 100 in the 80s or 70s or even lower, because it's so fucking good. And yet, then you have Scary Monsters, and then you have Heroes. I happen to really love Lodger. Black Star is amazing, so is The Next Day. Black Star is a little depressing for me to listen to, but it's amazing. So yeah, if I was going for more Bowie, there's a reason he's one of my favorites. It's not just because of the external appearance stuff. It's not just because of the legacy, or because of, you know, like the outfits, or, you know, he did these cool songs like Life on Mars, and it's that too, but also it's the complete body of work and the evolution. Even 90s Bowie, I think, is great and underrated. George Harrison, All Things Must Pass. It's a triple album, and it just came out remastered, which is remixed, in fact, which is probably why it's so high on this list. It moves me, and I think it's one of the best albums ever made. And there's a pureness to it, because George wrote these songs while he was in the Beatles, and they just either didn't focus on them, they rejected them, but he ended up saving them and then doing them. I think George was at a very interesting place in his life, which is why the songs were so good. And not all of them were written while he was in the Beatles, but it's like a good mix of that plus new ones. And I love his voice and his lyrics and everything. The guitar in particular, all the guest stars he had. The only flaw I have with this album is that the third disc is more of a jam session, which sounds better now that it's remixed. But I don't love it, and I don't listen to it a ton. But I still think that if you take the two first discs, the you know, 1 and 2 are pretty much flawless. Like, I don't skip any songs. I got Pink Floyd Animals. Why is this so high? I'm not sure why this is so high, but I think that's how I'm feeling at the moment. And some people will be like, well, why is Pink Floyd Animals, you know, your number 3 when there's so much other good music, or Floyd? There's something about Animals. I think it's just the musicianship. It's the concept. It's the Gilmore's guitar. You know, it's 4 songs. It's Pigs on the Wing, parts 1 and 2. It's dogs, it's pigs, it's sheep. That's it. And they're long, and it's Floyd at their most, like, overindulgent. It's Waters, you know, lyrically kind of digging into just the way the world works in his view. But Rick Wright is great on this album too. Every member of the band, even though they had a miserable time making it, to me this is their most impressive album as musicians, which I really enjoy. And there are moments on this album, like the highs on this album are extremely high. And I think, again, it's close. Wish You Were Here and The Wall are so close, but some days, and at the moment, I'm feeling like Animals is one of my favorite albums ever made, and therefore it's number 3. Can you guess number 2 or number 1? I'll give you a minute. I don't even remember. No, I remember. So Led Zeppelin, Physical Graffiti, I put at number 2. This is their double album. Make no mistake, this is not a perfect album. It's just one of my favorites. I put it up here because it has the song 10 Years Gone on it, and Kashmir, which, 10 Years Gone is one of my favorite songs, if not my favorite song ever made. And Kashmir is amazing. In My Time of Dying, there's, the second half is a little weird. There's some stuff on here that was left over from their previous albums, and it shows, but I love variety on an album. I love listening to all the little studio banter. And then you have songs like, let's see. Okay. So you have Custard Pie, The Rover, the Wonton song, Sick Again, Houses of the Holy. What? Then you have Kashmir, In the Light, Trampled Underfoot, 10 Years Gone, In My Time of Dying. Those are the epics. Then you have like other cool songs like Bronyar. You have Night Flight, Down by the Seaside. And then there's some stuff that I'm not crazy about. But for the most part, though, the highs on this album extend to very, very high highs, in fact. And Robert Plant's voice is a little fucked up on this album, which I like. And Jimmy Page is at his top as a producer and a guitarist, and John Paul Jones is right there with him. And Bonham, always from the beginning, one of the best drummers from the very beginning, first album. Here, I think he's even better. I don't know how to explain it other than they kept topping themselves, and then Physical Graffiti is just this big bloated mess, and I love it. And that actually ties in well with my favorite album. And I couldn't see. Listen, top 10 was hard. I'm going to say the Beatles' White Album is my favorite for the same reason Physical Graffiti is, because it is the Beatles' double album. It's got some stuff on it that I do not like. Revolution number 9 in particular, and like Wild Honey Pie. Some stuff on this album is just skip worthy for me. I'm sorry to say. But when you really look across this album, first of all, I used to listen to this in music class. My teacher would come to in grade school and just play guitar and just like sing. And there's a lot of songs from the White Album that I really loved. And I remember reading the lyrics. I was like, wow, this is so cool. And years later, I appreciated it even more hearing the album. But like, stuff like Dear Prudence, Back in the USSR, Glass Onion, While My Guitar Gently Weeps, Happiness is a Warm Gun, So Tired. You have stuff like Rocky Raccoon, I Will, and Julia, both beautiful. Mother Nature's Son is actually one of my favorite songs of all time. Sexy Sadie, Helter Skelter, Long, 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 Cry Baby Cry, and then Savoy Truffle and Good Night. Everything else, for the most part, I think is good. Like, I like Obla Di Obla Da. It's not my favorite. The only stuff that I don't particularly love, like I said, like I love all of the songs. Blackbird in particular is great. Piggies is fun. Pretty much just Revolution number 9. Yeah, I gotta skip that. But otherwise, Wild Honey Pie is only 53 seconds. So yeah, I like seeing the band. They're still working together a little bit, but they're all kind of separating into their own separate entities, writing some of the most interesting songs and amazing songs. Like, they just pulled them out of the air while they were on retreat at that Maharishi's. And I think I just happen to enjoy albums with a lot of variety, with great songs, with weird stuff, and also stuff that could work really well as a single. And I think that's what you get with White Album, Physical Graffiti, and like All Things Must Pass for sure, Station to Station, OK Computer. Animals is the only one that's kind of the odd one out because it's just 4 songs and they're so long. But yeah, so that's my list. I do think the White Album is my favorite, but also, that could change. Like I said, there's a lot of music out there I know I'm not listing, a lot of genres I'm losing out on. I love, there's a lot of hard rock that I can really enjoy. It's not my favorite. I enjoy some hip hop. I enjoy some electronic. I used to listen to club music. classical. I can enjoy, like, Holst's The Planets. I love video game music, which encompasses all genres, but specifically, like, Uematsu's work. It's just, these are the ones that I hold in the highest regard, some of which I own on vinyl, that I listen to frequently. Stuff that, as someone who writes songs and plays guitar in the style of these songs, because it's what resonates the most with me, these I think are my favorites. Who knows what will be here in 5 years? Who knows? It could change. And I probably missed a bunch of good stuff. There's almost certainly some bands that I've listened to a lot that are not on here. Like, Train. Oh, wait, no. Definitely not Train. Like Nickelback. No. Like Papa Roach. No. Not my style. I'll stick with this list. Anyway, so now you can feel free to judge me. If you made it this far, and you watched the whole video, I didn't expect this to be an hour and a half. I expected a half hour. But if you've made it this far, then feel free to write your top 10. Tell me what you like about my list, what you didn't like. I'm serious. I would be curious to see musically what I can learn from you. And I'll take it into account. So, if you maybe want to check out some of this stuff, and you like it, that would be great. And if not, then that's cool too. This is just for fun. I just wanted to see if I could do it, and here it is. Okay, now I'm gone. See you whenever.